はい、どうもこんにちは。ロメオの心臓です。皆さんいかがお過ごしでしょうか。今日はタイトルにありますように、ディビジョン2に関する装備のビデオとなっております。前回同様ですね、アレックスさんの方からソースを少しお借りして、そちらの方を翻訳させていただいております。ちょっとだけね、ネタバレ、になるかもしれない要素を含むので、それが嫌な方は、ぜひブラウザバックを。それ以外の方は、短いですけれども、どうかお楽しみください。それでは、どうぞ。
Now, to begin with, as mentioned, the weapon annex dropped the other week, and it basically gave us a little bit more information on how weapons will work in the Division 2, some of the ways they've changed. They spoke a bit about exotics, about talents, about mods, and about grenades. So if you guys have missed any of that, then do be sure to check out the video, or of course the post itself. But today, I want to speak slightly more specifically about the things mentioned in the state of the game. They did, to begin with, start by recapping the addition of a new weapon category, which is just straight rifles. For those of you guys that have played Division 1, then you'll know that typically there were assault rifles and there were also marksman rifles. But then within that category, there were some weapons that were sort of dropped in there that didn't necessarily fit. So the introduction of this new third rifle class is basically designed for those sort of burst fire weapons, semi-automatic things. The idea behind that being that now there's a new weapon category, they can make talents and perks specifically for those types of weapons, as opposed to, say, in the past, if you had like a semi-auto weapon but it had a talent that was clearly made for an automatic weapon, then you couldn't really get the most value out of it. So that's one thing they mentioned. They kind of sort of gave that as a quick recap just for those people that might have missed it. But the big important stuff came when they started speaking about exotics. So first and foremost, exotics in the Division 2 are going to be fundamentally different. They are going to be a lot more unique. They're going to have more stories to tell. They're not just going to be these sort of niche weapons that, you know, have like a chrome paint job that looks slightly flashy and have like some interesting talents. They want them to be a lot more meaningful this time around. So visually, you'll see them and they'll stand out a lot more. They'll have their own kind of lore. They'll have their stories to tell. But what they also want to do is make them a little bit more powerful this time around. But in order to do that, they had to make a few changes. So in the Division 1, if you've got an exotic weapon, exotic gear, you could equip as much of it as you wanted. And as a result of that, perks and sort of design ethos was that they're a little bit more niche. So they were powerful, they were useful, but they weren't like best in slot to the point where everyone felt like they had to run with exotics. However, in the Division 2, they're actually going to be adopting a system that is very similar to Destiny, whereby you will only be able to equip one exotic weapon and one exotic piece of gear. Now, this is a drastic change to the way the system has worked beforehand, but what this allows them to do is lean more heavily into the design of those weapons, make them slightly more powerful because of these limitations. Suddenly, you're going to have to think twice. You're going to have to think, you know what? I really want that exotic bolt-action sniper rifle, which, by the way, has been confirmed, or this exotic assault rifle, and I really want this like exotic chest piece. But once you've made that choice and you've equipped it, that of course means you can't then go and throw on some exotic boots or an exotic sidearm at the same time. So you will have to be slightly more thoughtful about your choices, but again, it does then mean they can be slightly more inventive and slightly more interesting with the way the weapons work. They can make them slightly stronger because you won't suddenly be able to go in like this Terminator who's just got exotics 24/7. Additionally, as you'd of course come to expect, they will still carry unique talents. And one of the interesting things they mentioned as well is that the sort of journey you have with these weapons is going to be a little bit more personal, because when you obtain them, there will be a system in game whereby you will be able to upgrade them and bring them with you throughout your game's kind of life cycle. So then they'll kind of have a slightly more important story to tell. So, you know, if you obtain it earlier on in the game and you think, you know, this is cool, but it's of course lower level, you won't then suddenly just throw it away once you start to level up. Instead, you'll be able to bring that with you. It's not clear at this stage whether that's something that will extend to other weapons or whether it's exclusively tied to exotics, but they did mention there is basically a system in place designed so that you can bring your exotics with you, level them up as you go, and kind of keep them as these ongoing weapons that, you know, you can have up to end game. Additionally, for those of you guys wondering, maybe if you play Division 1, none of the old exotics will be coming over to Division 2. Every single exotic weapon in the Division 2 will be brand new. There will be some models of old exotics that will make their way into D2, but they won't be exotic. They might take something like the example Thailander used was the house. That as a weapon type and a weapon model will be in Division 2, but it won't be exotic. It will just be a regular legendary item you can obtain. So there will be some throwbacks in that respect, but in terms of exotics, every single weapon will be brand new. However, moving on from there to speak about weapon talents, this is the thing that is really, really interesting. There's some information here that is going to, as mentioned, fundamentally change the way we think about our builds. Now, if you guys saw any of the gameplay coming out of E3, you'll remember that all the weapons and all the gear was legendary, so you know, predictably, all those weapons only had one talent. But that is, of course, not indicative of all types of weapons in the game. If you've played Division 1, you'll know that depending on the rarity, you have different numbers of talents on your weapon. And that too extends into the Division 2. So in the state of the game, they gave us a better idea by explaining how a high-end weapon might look when you start to progress into endgame. They themselves will carry 3 talents, as you would expect, but the way talents work this time round is a little different. They will still be randomly rolled, so of course you will still have the option to continue searching for that god roll weapon, so to speak. But this time around, the talents fall into one of 3 categories. Every single high-end weapon will have 1 talent in each of these categories. The first one is what they're referring to as an active talent. This is basically a talent that is triggered through gameplay. It might be something like landing headshots, shooting an enemy that's on fire, shooting an enemy that is maybe, I don't know, stuck in a trap. Basically, these will be talents that will have an augmented UI element on screen that will kind of indicate how soon till it procs, and you'll actually be able to visibly see this happen. So essentially, it's a talent that is tied to specific actions in gameplay. So they're your active talents. Following on from there, you then have what is referred to as a characteristic talent. Now, this is something that is slightly more relating to the weapon itself, like how it feels, how it handles. These could be things like stability talents, you know, range talents, things that basically infer the way that the weapon will behave. And the reason they wanted to put this in as a fixed category is because in the Division 1, those talents existed, but no one would ever really take them over something like brutal or deadly or something like that. So by having it as a staple for all weapons, it then means you have a talent that leans slightly more into the way that the weapon behaves. So that is the second pillar. And the third one is really interesting. This is a holstered talent that will only actually take effect when you're not using the weapon. In other words, when it's holstered. Now keep in mind, you can have 3 weapons. You have your primary, your secondary, and your sidearm. And of course, given that every single weapon, assuming you're using high-end, will have a holstered talent, that then means when it comes to build diversity and sort of thinking about your builds, then you have 2 potential weapons, 2 potential talents, that can be active simply by not using the weapon. So you suddenly start thinking about things in completely different ways. You think, you know what, this weapon's really cool because it's got a really useful active talent. I like the characteristic on it, but it's also got this really useful holstered talent that might make me want to actually put the weapon away and use it in conjunction with something else. So suddenly you think about this thing in a whole new dynamic, and this is really cool. They did also say on Twitter, Marco Style actually asked Stylander if there was any intention to make it so these holstered talents are kind of active all the time, even if you haven't holstered the weapon. He said they're still testing out exactly how it works, but fundamentally right now, they are holstered talents. So when you're not using the weapon, it can still benefit you and your build. And of course, that means you can think about things in completely new ways. So 3 talents. Active, things that are typically triggered in gameplay. Characteristic, things that effectively influence the way the weapon behaves and handles and just kind of leans into the type of weapon that it is. And holstered for when you're not using the weapon. So 3 very different pillars, all very exciting, and again, all going to fundamentally change the way that we think about our builds. Now, finally, the last thing worth mentioning, they did also confirm a couple of new things. There were 2 weapons, or 1 weapon and 1 slightly broader category they called out with regards to new announcements. They have said there will be a P90 in the Division 2, which is really cool. I like P90s. Like, anytime there's a game that has SMGs, I really like using P90s. So that is something that I'm super looking forward to. I used SMGs a lot in the Division 1, so I can definitely see myself leaning into that in the Division 2. And they did also confirm there will be an exotic bolt action sniper rifle. Apparently this is something that Hamish has been asking for a very long time. And Thylander said during the state of the game, yes, that will be a thing. No kind of specific name on that, but that is something else to look forward to. So for the time being, that is pretty much it. That's a quick update on everything they spoke about yesterday, in case you guys missed it. If you have any more questions, by all means drop them down below. If you missed the weapon annex from last week, then you can check that in the description box link below. And aside from that, be sure to keep it locked.
というわけで、今回の動画はここまでとなっております。ちょっとね、最初の方で液像の説明があってね、また液像なのかよっていう風に思われないかなってちょっと心配してます、実は。ところが内容はね、全く別物なのでご安心ください。で、後ろで流れてるのがState of the Game というね、このアレックスさんが実際にまとめてくれた時の回ですね。この時は実は画像とか一切なくてですね、もうずーっと喋ってるだけだったんで、なかなか苦痛なものでした。はい、以上になります。というわけでまた次回の動画でお会いしましょう。ロメオの心臓でした。ありがとうございました。バイバイ。
Lots of cringe. It's good.